It's 9.
Okay, Dada.
All right. Saya mula sekarang ya. Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin. Wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Allahumma aftah alayna hikmataka wa anshur alayna min khazaini rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. Prof. Akmal Huzairi bin Abdul Rahman, the Director of Centris, Associate Professor Dr. Nazra Ahmad, Deputy Director of Centris Islamization Office, Honorable panel members, Emeritus Professor Dr. Muhammad Kamal Hassan, Associate Professor Dr. Wan Azam Muhammad Amin, Associate Professor Dr. Amrul Shakur Duncan Prees, and Assistant Professor Dr. Muhammad Farid Ali Al-Fijawi, professors, doctors, brothers and sisters, wherever you may be, in Malaysia or outside of Malaysia, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Welcome to Centris Virtual Forum 2021, Series number 4, Humanizing Education for Raḥmatan lil Alamin, Spirituality and Pedagogy. To gain more barakah on this blessed day, Thursday, 23rd December 2021, 18th Jumad al-Awwal, 1443, let us begin the forum with recitation of the Kitab al-Fatiha. Ameen. I would like to invite Brother Saiful Akmal from Centris to read a short dua to ask Allah for further barakah and to mark the start of our program this morning. Brother Saiful.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم إنك خلاق العظيم إنك سميع عليم إنك غفور رحيم إنك رب العرش العظيم يا Allah. In conjunction with the opening ceremony of our forum, we pray unto you to thank on your overflowing infinite favor to us. Ease our tasks as your servants. O Ya Allah, we beseech your blessing to make this occasion, to make this program end in success. Ya Hayyu Ya Qayyum, Ya Dhal Jalali wal Ikram. Allahumma inna as'aluka ilman nafi'a wa rizqan tayyiba wa amalan mutaqabbala. Ya Allah, grant us the blessing of remembrance for you, to be grateful, steadfast in worshipping you. يا غفور الودود ربنا عليك توكلنا وإليك أنبنا وإليك المصير ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين.
تقبل الله منكم منا ومنكم تقبل يا كريم. Thank you very much, Brother Saiful. Education has always been the bedrock of humanity as it lays down the architecture of the future. Unfortunately, with the excessive focus on industrialization, education has lost its soul and its right bearings. I'm muted. Sorry, I thought I was muted. The IIUM maintains that education or the propagation and advancements of knowledge is an amānah or trust from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that must conform to the purpose of his creation of the universe. Education is to nurture the person as Allah's servant, abd, and his khalīfah or steward or trustee on earth, and to function in accordance to his will, where the quest of knowledge is considered as an act of ibādah or worship. Unlike the humanism of secularism, the humanism that is referred to here is the humanism of Islam, with emphasis on ruhiyah, spirituality. The usage of the term Raḥmatan lil Alamin must be based on the objectives of the Sharia because the content of the Sharia is a manifestation of Allah's Raḥmah Allah's Raḥmah to all the worlds, and where al-amru bil ma'ruf wa nahyu anil munkar are manifestations of Raḥmatan lil alamin. It is clear then that humanizing education for Raḥmatan lil alamin requires a great deal of attention to spirituality, which refers to matters pertaining to the existence of man and nature in relation to the Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This fundamental core of humanity has long been sidelined to the detriment of mankind and consequently to his environment and civilization. Spirituality and pedagogy then become a very important topic and discourse. Today's forum is to address spirituality and pedagogy from four essential areas, namely, first, the concept, definition, and principles of Islamic spirituality in education with a certain focus. Second, spiritual pedagogical approaches in education, lessons from our heritage. Third, spirituality and pedagogy, a Maqāsidi approach. And fourth, relevantizing Islamic spiritual and pedagogical heritage in the 21st century. We will now listen to the Director of Centris, Prof. Akmal Khuzairi, with his recorded welcoming remark.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man tabi'ahu wa wala. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Associate Professor Dr. Nazrah Ahmad, Deputy Director of Center for Islamization, Head of Islamization Unit at Center for Islamization, Dr. Nurjana Hassan. Our guest speakers for today's virtual forum, Professor Dr. Muhammad Kamal Hassan, the advisor for Center for Islamization, Associate Professor Dr. Wan Azam Muhammad Amin from Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman, Kuliah of Islamic River Knowledge and Human Sciences, Associate Professor Dr. Abdul Shakur Duncan Priest from Kuliah of Education, and Assistant Professor Dr. Muhammad Farid Ali Al-Fijawi from Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman, Kuliah of Islamic River Knowledge and Human Sciences, and our respected colleagues of staff and also students of International Islamic University Malaysia. Welcome to our fourth virtual forum for 2021. This is going to be our last virtual forum for this year, inshallah. We have been successfully organizing 3 previous virtual seminars or webinars throughout the year concerning some contemporary issues and some topics that needs to be given perspectives by our own scholars at the university. We have been talking about vaccination. We have been talking about issues pertaining to some social problems that we have been facing in Malaysia. And this time, inshallah, we'll be discussing about spirituality and pedagogy. That is one of the most important topic, since we have been talking about how to humanize education for Raḥmatan lil alamin. And one of the initiative that we should be looking into is how to apply spirituality in the context of pedagogy. And at Centris, we strive at giving our colleagues, staff and students alike the understanding of some of the key words that we have always been hearing in the discourses of this university, especially when we are talking about the Sejahtera academic framework. We are talking about humanizing education. We are talking about Raḥmatan lil alamin. And one of those terms that pop up is spirituality and pedagogy. And one who referred to the literature of spirituality and pedagogy would realize that there have been studies, there have been academic efforts put forward by some of our academics and also some scholars in the educational sector to try to look into how is it possible for us to apply spirituality in the context of education. Of course, we've been talking about Islamic education, but how to actually apply one of the elements of Islamic education, that is spirituality, in our instruction, in our teaching, i.e. pedagogy. So inshallah, this session is meant to listen from the experts and also those who have been researching in this area so that we might benefit. And the main objective is to have a perspective about the concept of spirituality and pedagogy. And we would also like to see the take-home message from this webinar is how to apply spirituality in pedagogy as Murabbi, as teachers in International Islamic University, Malaysia. So this is the main objective of which we, inshallah, will try to achieve through this webinar. We have with ourselves Prof. Dr. Muhammad Kamal Hassan and three other panelists who are with us today, all of whom coming from their own expertise will be talking to give us the insights about spirituality and also pedagogy. Some of the scholars who have been talking about spiritual pedagogy, they were talking about values. So what is meant by spirituality, there are values that a teacher have and try to transfer and also transform the students with those values. They've been talking about spirituality as representing the set of values that need to be in a teacher so that he or she would be able to apply it in pedagogy, in his classroom teaching. And how is it possible that education is not about transmitting knowledge only, but it is also about generating new ideas. And the most important objective of education is to transform. So these three elements, to transmit, to generate, and also to transform, are the cornerstones of education, the concept of education today. And in order to transform, we need values, because values is the essential, the principle, the foundation that need to be there for us to transform a character. When we talk about transforming a character, a student, so one of the most important thing that we need to strive at is to transform a character, and that cannot be done if the teacher himself or herself does not have certain values. So the literature have been talking about spirituality from this perspective, about teachers having values. But inshallah, I'll be hearing a lot more from today's seminar. And how is it possible for us to have a overarching view about spirituality and also pedagogy? And we hope it'll be a very fruitful discussion, inshallah, for us all today, this morning. And we hope that we can really understand that the purpose of having such a webinar is, at the end of the day, is to discuss and share ideas. And we hope we can exchange ideas, we can improve the existing ideas. Even perhaps at the end of the day, we can discover new ideas pertaining to spirituality and pedagogy. My gratitude and thanks go to our respected speakers who have been very much, I would say, very kind to centrists in accepting the invitation and sparing some of their most precious time with us to share their valuable thoughts and insights on this very important topic. To Prof. Dr. Muhammad Kamal Hassan, to our colleague, Associate Professor Dr. Wan Azam, and our colleague from Kuliah of Education, Associate Professor Dr. Abdul Shakur Duncan Priest, and not to forget Assistant Professor Dr. Muhammad Farid Ali Al-Fijawi. So inshallah, you'll be learning a lot from these figures, and we'll be exchanging ideas with them. We'll be discussing some of the most salient issues and points pertaining to spirituality and pedagogy, inshallah, with them. And we'll have our understanding at the end of the day, inshallah, improved in terms of how to apply spirituality in the context of teaching, in the context of pedagogy, inshallah. Not to forget my gratitude also to our centrist team who has been giving their utmost efforts in organizing this program. Thank you to Dr. Nurjana Hassan, Dr. Nazra Ahmad for organizing this program. We hope that it can reach out to as many staff and students as possible through this virtual platform. And even for an example, if they do not have the time to participate with us in real time, inshallah, we'll have the session recorded and they can always come back to our website to have a look at it about this important topic that need to be discussed and also exposed to our staff and students at the university, especially in the context of implementing the Sejahtera academic framework. And we hope that our effort will be blessed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and His blessing is in the form of giving us more understanding of the topic, inshallah, for today's webinar about humanizing education for Raḥmatan lil Alameen, spirituality and pedagogy. And I hope that it will run well, the program, with the blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And thank you all again for participating and giving your precious time to learn and to discuss, exchange ideas through this platform. أقول قولي هذا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Thank you.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Thank you very much, Professor Akmal. Spirituality and pedagogy, values transmission, generation of new ideas, and character transformation based on Tawhidic virtues. That's the very important points that we can sum up from Prof. Akmal's address. He's not able to be with us today in lieu of another very important commitment that cannot be scheduled on another date. So the address just now was recorded. We have four distinguished academics as our panelists today. All four panelists will be allotted a maximum of 30 minutes each. A maximum of 30 minutes each to deliver their addresses. These will be followed by an hour or so of question and answers. I would encourage participants to write down their questions on the chat box so that our panelists can address each question or similar questions in rounds. Our first panelist is Professor Emeritus Dr. Muhammad Kamal Hassan. Prof. Kamal Hassan is one of the founding fathers of the IIUM. From writing the concept paper and rationale for the establishment of the university in 1982, he served in various administrative capacities to being the third rector of IIUM from 1999 to 2006. Prof. Kamal retired from IIUM in 2017, yet he remains very active. And currently, he is a volunteer consultant for many organizations, among others, IIUM, the Institute of Islamic Trainings, Malaysia, the chairman for LAPAI, Islamic Religious Education Coordination and Advisory Board, and most importantly, the honorary advisor for the Center for Islamization, Centris IIUM. The foci of his writings are mainly on philosophy and contemporary Islamic thought, contemporary issues, religion, society, spirituality, ethics and morality, and Islamic education, with a special attention to the moral and spiritual development and education of human beings from the Islamic perspective. I would like now to invite Professor Emeritus Dr. Kamal Hassan to deliver his address on Islamic spirituality in education, concept, definition, and principles, with focus on Islamization of the self as an important educational agenda in the curriculum of IIUM as a showcase. Prof. Kamal, tafadhal.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much, Dr. Noor Jannah, Professor Akmal Khuzairi, the Director of Centris, Associate Professor Dr. Nadra, Associate Professor Wan Muhammad Azam, Dr. Muhammad Farid Al-Fijawi, and Associate Professor Dr. Abdul Shakur Duncan Priest. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi alladhi hadana lihada wa ma kunna linahtadiya lawla an hadana Allah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursalin Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. Wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-'aliyyil 'azim. Alhamdulillah, I thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for it is by His grace and by His mercy that I'm able to join this Centris virtual forum. I'm also grateful to Dr. Noor Jannah for agreeing to my proposal that I speak on Islamization of the self as an important educational agenda in the curriculum of IIUM. I have about maybe about 16, 17 papers and about 17 pages, and I'll try to complete my presentation within the half an hour allotted to me, inshallah. Introduction. Much has been written, discussed, and debated on the subject of Islamization of human knowledge ever since the discourse was started by its prominent proponents such as Professor Said Naqib Al-Attas, Al-Marhum Professor Dr. Ismail Raji Al-Faruqi, Al-Marhum Professor Dr. Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman, Al-Marhum Sheikh Taha Jabir, and others. It was clear to the perceptive Islamic scholars and intellectuals that Western imperialism, colonialism, secularism, and secular modernity had negative and disastrous impacts on the culture and education of the Muslims. Many young Muslims came under the impact of secularized and westernized knowledge, and in the process lost their Islamic identity. This was the historical and sociological background of the emergence of the intellectual discourse and movement known popularly as Islamization of knowledge. I personally prefer to call it Islamization or Islamicization of human knowledge, because the word knowledge translated into Arabic is ilm. In the Quran, ilm refers to true knowledge, God's knowledge, and knowledge revealed by Allah, all of which are pure, true, perfect, and infallible. It would be absurd, if not blasphemous, to Islamize God's knowledge or divine revelation like the Quran and the other authentic books of God. It is human knowledge which is acquired by his reason or experience that is non-infallible, value-free, or always true. It is this intellectually or experientially acquired knowledge that needs correction, revision, refutation, or critique. It is therefore necessary to qualify the word knowledge to human knowledge, because standing by itself, the word knowledge by itself would include God's knowledge. Hence, we in IIUM prefer to use the phrase Islamization of human knowledge instead of Islamization of knowledge. As a matter of fact, I popularized the use of the phrase Islamization of human knowledge after I became the third rector of IIUM. I also realized that in general, the contemporary literature and debate on Islamization of knowledge emphasize the importance of Islamizing knowledge without addressing the issue of the knowledge producer, the knowledge constructor, the human agency responsible for developing, producing, constructing, or disseminating knowledge. I felt that too much emphasis was given to knowledge and philosophy of knowledge per se, or science and philosophy of science per se, and too little attention was given to the knowledge constructor, producer, or knowledge seeker, or the scientist, who is a human being with all kinds of problems in his or her thought, worldview, attitudes, biases, and ethical behavior and character. Thus, in my definition and explanations on Islamization of human knowledge in IIUM, IOHK, or Islamicization of human knowledge, consists of two dimensions, the academic and the non-academic, as well as personal dimensions. The second dimension is called Islamization of the self, and this includes the spirituality that our forum is focused on. Now I shall elaborate this second dimension after this. I like to refer to the book that Centris published in 2013, which is called IIUM Policies and Guidelines on Islamization. And in that book, I explained my preference for the use of the term Islamicization instead of Islamization. My explanation is as follows. The word Islamicization is derived from the adjective Islamic, while the word Islamization is derived from the verb Islamize. To Islamize is to make something Islamic, which means, among others, to be in accordance, in harmony, or agreeable with the values and norms of Islam, even if it is the product or the practice of non-Muslim peoples, cultures, societies, or civilizations. The verb to Islamize originally implies to convert to Islam. Hence, Islamization used to refer to the process of conversion to Islam. It is not surprising that many people, especially non-Muslims, perceive Islamization of human knowledge as a process of converting human knowledge to Islam, while the phrase Islamicization of human knowledge may be understood to be similar to Islamization of human knowledge. It has the connotation of inclusivity. I like to underline that word inclusivity from the adjective Islamic, which has a variety of meanings, one of which is the readiness to acknowledge, to recognize, to adopt, or to accept anything produced, practiced by, or originating from non-Muslim traditions, cultures, societies, systems, or institutions, which is considered to be in harmony with or not opposed to the worldview, principles, values, and norms of Islam. It should be made clear that neither Islamization nor Islamicization implies the desire to convert non-Muslims to Islam or to impose the values, beliefs, worldview, systems, perspectives, and norms of Islam upon non-Muslims. The terminology emphasizes the necessity of Muslims to work, to live and act in accordance with the Aqidah, the Sharia, and Akhlaq of Islam to achieve the goals of al-Hasana fil dunya and al-Hasana fil akhirah. Now I come to the subject of Islamization of the self, or IOS. In the book, IIUM Policies and Guidelines on Islamization, we define Islamization of the self as follows in 3 paragraphs. In paragraph 551, it says, Islamization or Islamicization of the self entails a continuous process which focuses on the development and strengthening of ilm, iman, yaqeen, taqwa, ihsan, husnul khuluq. And these are all spiritual values. And in 552, the university is committed to the principle of Islamization of the self because it is the basis of holistic human development in the worldview of Islam. In order to overcome what the Quran describes as diseases of the heart or amrad al-qalb, and to fulfill the requisite spiritual and ethical attributes of true scholars, the Quran enjoins the process of the purification of the soul. Again, a very, very spiritual effort as a basic religious obligation and the proper development of the personality of seekers of knowledge and scholars who are imbued with the virtues of humility, God-fearing consciousness, ihsan, integrity, and the principles of spiritual moral excellence. In paragraph 553, it says, the process of Islamicization, therefore, includes the implementation of jihadun nafs, very important process of spiritual purification of the soul. This means striving against the influence of base desires, against moral vices, as well as temptations of worldly pleasures. Tazkiyatun nafs is also included in this process, and tahdhib al-akhlaq, which is the process of acquiring, refining, and nurturing the qualities of good character of believers as enjoined by the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Islamization of the self involves at least 3 important spiritual concepts: jihadun nafs, tazkiyatun nafs, and tahdhib al-akhlaq. I shall elaborate on the meanings and implementations of the above 3 paragraphs below. And the first I want to speak is man as a spiritual. When I say man, of course, that includes woman as well. Man as a spiritual and moral being. And this is why our emphasis on spirituality is so fundamental, because man is essentially a spiritual and moral being. Whereas from the Western point of view, Homo sapiens are essentially naturalist and rational being with the mind, without the soul, without the inherent moral inclination to be good, which is the fitrah. So without the fitrah and without the soul, the modern man is just pure brain and brawn. From the worldview of the Quran, we know that the human being is firstly and essentially a spiritual moral being with a physical body. After Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates and fashions the body, man's spiritual essence, the ruh, which is of divine origin, is then infused into the body to be part and parcel of the human self. The ruh will be released from the body at death to live on forever in the hereafter in a different form. The Quran says, and this is in translation from Surah Al-Hijr, Surah 15, verses 28 to 29, recall when your Lord said to the angels, I will indeed bring into being a human being out of dry, wringing clay wrought from black mud. when I have completed shaping him and have breathed into him of my spirit, then fall you down before him in prostration. Human beings' spiritual nature and essence is clearly revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the well-known Quranic verse on what is known by many Muslim scholars as the primordial covenant between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and all human beings in the pre-existential state. This is from Surah Al-A'raf, Surah number 8, verse 172. And recall, O Prophet, when your Lord brought forth descendants from the loins of the sons of Adam and made them witnesses against their own selves, asking them, am I not your Lord? And they said, yes, we do testify. We did so, lest you claim on the day of resurrection, we were unaware of this. To understand the meaning of the primordial covenant, we need to read some of the commentary given by Abu al-A'la Maududi as follows. And this is quotation from Abu al-A'la Maududi. This event, according to several traditions, took place at the time of the creation of Adam. Apart from the prostration of the angels before Adam and the proclamation that man would be God's vicegerent on earth, all the future progeny of Adam were gathered and were endowed with both existence and consciousness in order to bear witness to God's lordship. The best interpretation of this event is found in a statement by Ubay bin Ka'ab, who has probably given the substance of what we had heard from the Prophet, peace be upon him. God gathered all human beings, divided them into different groups, granted them human form and the faculty of speech, made them enter into a covenant, and then making them witness against themselves, he asked them, am I not your Lord? And they replied, assuredly you are our Lord. Then God told them, I call upon the sky and the earth and your own progenitor, Adam, to be witness against you, lest you should say on the day of judgment that you were ignorant of this. Know well that no one other than me deserves to be worshipped, and no one other than me is your Lord. So do not ascribe any partner to me. I shall send to you my messengers who will remind you of this covenant which you made with me. I shall send down to you my books. In reply, all said, we witness that you are our Lord and our deity. We have no Lord or deity other than you. God caused all human beings whom he intended to create until the last day to come into existence. He endowed upon them life, consciousness, and the faculty of speech, and brought home to them that there is no God or Lord besides him, and that Islam alone is the right way to serve him. The Quran explains in another verse that man's natural disposition or constitution called fitrah is none other than his innate spiritual nature referred to in the verse on the primordial covenant. It is a universal, unchanging nature of the human constitution as indicated by the following verse, that is Surah Ar-Rum, verse 30. O Prophet and his followers, set your face single-mindedly to the true faith, ad-deen, and adhere to the true nature, fitrah, on which Allah has created human beings. There is no altering of the mold fashioned by Allah. That is the true, right religion, although most people do not know. In a famous hadith reported by Bukhari and Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ said, every child is born in this natural disposition, al-fitrah. It is only his parents that later turn him into a Jew, a Christian, or a Magian. In a hadith which has been reported by Imam Ahmad, it has been related that one day the Prophet said during an address, "My Lord says, I have created all my servants on true faith. And then the Satans came and led them astray from their faith and made unlawful what I have made lawful from them and commanded them to associate with me those whom I have sent down no authority." Okay, in view of the shortage of time, I shall try to speed up. On the nature of the nafs, we know from the Quran that there are 3 stages: an-nafs al-amāra bis-sū', then there is an-nafs al-lawwāma, and then there is an-nafs al-mutma'innah. And that we need to, the process of tazkiyah an-nafs will, inshallah, tazkiyah an-nafs, jihad an-nafs, and also the tahdhib al-akhlaq will help us to attain the level of nafs al-mutma'innah. On the issue of the aqal, which also needs to be properly understood, the aqal in the Quran is actually the cognitive function of the qalb. It is not something separate as the mind in the brain. So it is the cognitive function of the heart, of the qalb, and the process of tazkiyah an-nafs, Islamization of the self, means also the process of purifying the aqal from the nafs and from the hawa and from the temptations of the flesh. Now, I will move on to the type of human being that will be produced once we have the heart that is cleansed, meaning the heart which is now healthy and going to be salim, that is qalb salim, inshallah, a sound heart that is freed of all the diseases, plus also the sound aqal, and together the qalb, which is salim, the sound aqal, will then produce what the Quran calls the ulul albab, the possessors of sound intellects. And the ulul albab is the model that we hope our staff and our students will aspire to become, because this is really a very important God mandated model. And if you have the model of the ulul albab, you're not going to have all these environmental problems, because these are the result of secular science without the guidance of qalb and the aqal, which is based on iman. So the ulul albab will be involved in understanding the science of God in the universe by all the scientific means, but their heart is in the process of dhikrullah. So the ulul albab is a combination of dhikr and fikr, and that is something that we need to also instill in our pedagogy. Dhikr and fikr integrated and not separated, as is being done nowadays. Then I just like to explain a little bit on the meaning of tazkiyatun nafs. The word tazkiyah comes from the word an-nama, that is growth, al-baraka, blessing, and increase in the goodness, or ziyada, al-khair, and the tazkiyah is an important religious obligation of the individual Muslim. The Prophet ﷺ also came to perform tazkiyah, among other things. Tazkiyah of al-mujtama, tazkiyah of society, and then tazkiyah of the self. We in our university, we want to begin with tazkiyah of the self, so that we can, when our students graduate, they can undertake the tazkiyah of the mujtama, of society. I mentioned here that the tazkiyah, as a general principle of societal and individual purification, or islah, or reform, is one of the most important educational objectives of the Quran and Islam. So I'm sure when other colleagues talk about the spirituality and pedagogy, then the aspect of tazkiyah or tarbiyah ruhiyah must come in. I mentioned here that this tazkiyah is necessary in order for the individual Muslim to overcome the diseases of the heart. And the diseases of the heart, among others, of course, the highest would be diseases of aqidah, that is kufr, shirk, and nifaq. All right, but inshallah, we are not going to be afflicted by these severe diseases. We are more afflicted by moral diseases rather than aqidah diseases. The non-Muslims have the aqidah disease of kufr, shirk, and nifaq. The Muslims have the moral, ethical disease of takabbur, riya, tama, hasad, hiqd, ujub, hubbul mal, hubbul jah, ghurur, and all that. And in our university, academic staff, they're human beings. They also, some of them also may be afflicted by this, by riya, ostentation, by self-conceitedness, high degree of self-admiration, and looking down upon others. These are moral diseases of the spiritual heart, and the tazkiyah is important. So that's why we hope that our university, inshallah, will further strengthen the position of tazkiyah to nafs, or Islamization of the self, as a part of the curriculum. Yeah. Nowadays, the curriculum is only dealing with the academic content, whereas the spiritual and moral content is not made a part of the curriculum. So we want that to be strengthened, inshallah, in the future. So I thank you very much for your patience and for giving me the time to express my views. Just one last point before I close, that is the limitation of the secularized human intellect. All right. So after we deal with Islamization of the self, we go to Islamization of human knowledge. And in the Islamization of human knowledge, we have to recognize the limitations of the secularized human intellect. And in our pedagogy, we should also try to critique the secular pedagogy coming out from America and the other secular schools of thought in education. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much, Professor Kamal Hassan, for being on the dot and for your very loaded presentation. You highlighted tazkiyatun nafs, jihad al-nafs, tahdhib al-akhlaq, with emphasis on the ruh, fikr and dhikr of ulul albab, tazkiyatul mujtama', tazkiyah or tarbiyah ruhiyah to overcome diseases of the heart, especially moral and ethical diseases when it comes to Muslims, as part of the IIUM curriculum and as I suppose as part of the curriculum for Muslim education, inshallah. Thank you very much, Professor Kamal. I would like to remind participants to write down your questions in the chat box, and inshallah at the end, towards the end of our program, we will then look into the questions and have rounds of answers from our panelists, inshallah. Our second panelist is Associate Professor Dr. Wan Muhammad Azam bin Muhammad Amin. Associate Professor Dr. Wan Azam attained his Doctor of Philosophy in Islamic Philosophy from the University of Edinburgh. His bachelor degree is in Islamic Studies, Usuluddin and Philosophy from the University Kebangsaan Malaysia, UKM. The area of his specialization are religious studies, Islamic studies, and Islamic philosophy, including Islamic Aqidah, Sufism, mysticism, and tasawwuf. He is currently attached to the Department of Usuluddin and Comparative Religion, Kuliah of Islamic Revealed Knowledge and Human Sciences, IIUM. I would like now to call upon Dr. Wan Azam to deliver his address on spiritual pedagogical approaches in education, lessons from Islamic heritage. Dr. Wan Azam, welcome.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Dr. Nurjannah, Prof. Dr. Muhammad Kamal Hassan, Professor Akmal, and Associate Professor Dr. Nazra, Dr. Farid, I can see here, Dr. Abdul Shakur. Yeah. Good morning, and once again, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. The topic given to me, spiritual pedagogical approaches in education. I'm looking to another screen near me, so to see the points that I am going to talk. I don't have the text, so I will talk. Hopefully it will be a short talk because much of the points and remark has been delivered by Prof. Kamal. I just add here and there little bits only. Spirituality, the word spirituality, something which is related to human souls, that cover the relation between man and Allah, man and man, and man and the universe. So this is one of the features of spirituality, Islamic spirituality, because we are the Khalifatullah fil ard. Our job is to maintain our relation with Allah, with amal, the good deeds, remembrance of Allah, taubatu ilallah, syukur ilallah, and many others. And then another point is that relation between man and man. This is another dimensions that we must consider when we talk about Islamic spirituality. And now in nowadays we can see this is quite important, it's quite pertinent, especially during the time of pandemics, during the time of this nowadays flooding, and then we need to go to them. We need to foster a relation man and man. And the other point in Islamic spirituality is man and universe, and current problems, current tragedy, the flooding, and then the disasters, calamities. I think this, because we do not have moral and ethics toward man and universe. We with the secular mind, we treated the universe, we treated the environment not in line with Islamic morality, Islamic principle, and others. So this is one another point. And number two is when we discuss Islamic spirituality, we must remember the hadith an ta'budallah ka'annaka tarah fa illam takun tarah fa innahu yarak. To serve Allah as though you could see him, for though you cannot see him, yet he sees you. So this spirituality applies to the sense of responsibility, accountability, the obedience to God, as well as seeking of his pleasure in every action in the man's life. And this is the place where our feelings, our relation with Allah, ourself with Allah, and this is the place where our aqidah could be corrupted, our aqidah could be deviated through shirk, khafi, or hidden shirk. This is also when Prof talk about the Islamization of oneself. This is the place. This is the problem now. We do something not for the sake of God, but in Islamic spirituality, this is the utmost important point that we have to deal with. And then the other point here is when we say Islamic spirituality, also has been discussed quite detailed by Prof just now, something which is related to spiritual hearts. Here, spiritual hearts. Spiritual hearts. When we go to the heritage, we can see in the Sufis teaching, in the Sufis writing, a lot of discussion on this. But I think only some of them are in line, or were in line with Islamic teaching, as they integrated with the Quranic verses, with the Sunnah of the prophets, and others. If we see this is, for example, the ilmul qulub of Abu Talib al-Makki, and if we compare with Ajaibul Qulub of Imam al-Ghazali in the Ihya Ulumuddin, although Ghazali took something from his predecessor, as he mentioned, but the content is different. The content were different, except for he elaborated some point only, because I think al-Ghazali has done some great jobs to refine the contents, and also some of the discussion were not included in the Ajaibul Qalb. Al-Ghazali also included the Aristotle view on the soul, on the concept of soul, and then what we heard from Prof just now actually is the Quranic point of view on the soul, and with the reading of many other books in the theory of the heart, I think Shah Waliullah, this is because heritage, I'm talking about the books a little bit, and then Al-Ghazali's Ibn Khaldun discuss almost the same points, because the soul, the human soul, centered in at the spiritual heart, but we do not know where is the spiritual heart. We only know by functions, by function. The human soul, we know it by function. Akal is spiritual hearts, or dhamir, or whatever it is, and then it is in the soul, and then the function of the desire also in the soul, and also the function of the intellect also in the human soul. I think this is also very pertinent when we discuss the Islamic spirituality. So a lot of discussion on this, but we can see the job of the classical scholars in integrating and make it relevant to the public, the concept of human soul. If we can say that it's the human soul started with Aristotle, if I'm not mistaken, and then at the hand of the Muslims, philosophers, Muslim Sufis, they integrated it with the al-mutawatirat. Al-mutawatirat here is the Quran and the Sunnah, and this is the concept of human soul. So this also must be given emphasis in our education, because this is not quantifiable. Our education today is, I mean, not only in Malaysia but others, this thing must be quantifiable. And when we talk about the soul, when we talk about the heart, when we talk about the intentions, this very difficult to be quantified. So this is what I can talk about the Islamic spirituality. And I know in the guidelines of Islamization produced by centuries, and also the new books of the Malay concept of sejahtera emphasizes these points. So I do not want to talk about this except for very little one. Spiritual pedagogy. I'm not an educationist in Kuliah of the educations, but my understanding is that the pedagogy is the way how to teach, that include that include assessment, that include experimentation and others. I mean, a very broad discussion background in education, but I only will talk about the spiritual one. The spiritual also has been discussed by Prof. Kamal just now. My emphasis is that the spiritual training or spiritual pedagogy will be based, or hopefully it will be based on the ittiba' sunnah, yeah, the following, the concept of the following the sunnah. Sunnah here means, as we understood, there are guidelines, there are something that haram, something that is sunat, and something that is wajib. Yeah? So the wajib one and the sunat one is becoming the point in the pedagogy. And this is very, very important, because now we do not, or we do, but not much is based on the ittiba'u sunnah. Yeah, ittiba'u sunnah. Yeah, this is once again our education now, except for the Quran and Sunnah. Yeah, the concept of ittiba'u sunnah in a wide coverage of meaning. Yeah, wide and huge meaning. The educations need to be based on ittiba'u sunnah. If we see previous classical scholars, the main points in their framework of education is ittiba'u sunnah. And in fact, Ar-Raghib al-Isfahani, who has written the one of the books, I think, Tahzibul Akhlaq, Tahzibul Akhlaq, yeah. The refinement of the characters makes ittiba'u sunnah as one of the doctrine or characteristic of his framework, and also others like Miskawayh. Miskawayh is not much on ittiba'u sunnah, but he has done something, yeah, because his teacher Yahya bin Adi was a Christian and wrote the Tahzibul Akhlaq in accordance with the Christian teachings. And even though he learned from this Christian teacher, but Ibn Miskawayh integrated the Aristotle and also some points or some hadith and some Quranic verses in his Tahzibul Akhlaq, the refinement of the character. So this is heritage, our classical heritage, and our challenge now is how to practice this refinement of the characters in our days. I mean, in this university and also the society as well. And Imam Ghazali also make the ittiba'u sunnah as one of the important point in his framework. Any theories that Al-Ghazali's set forth, he will make ittiba'u sunnah as one of the points, and because our sunnah is the khabar al-mutawatirat that include the sunnah, the hadith of the prophets. And then we go to the Ibn Khaldun as well, the ittiba'u sunnah as well. He mentioned about this, and the pertinent one is Shah Waliullah ad-Dihlawi. I mean, because he was a muhaddith, and the discussions, any discussion he did is ittiba'u sunnah, based on ittiba'u sunnah. So from this ittiba'u sunnah, I think a lot of things that we can take lessons from the heritage, from the sunnah. Yeah, say for instance, Prof has already emphasized on the tazkiyatun nafs. Yeah, and the best actions, the best amal of tazkiyatun nas is to refer to the hadith, to the book of Sunnah. Yeah? And this, I think, we need the expertise from the Quran and Sunnah, the department of the Quran and Sunnah, because good akhlaq, yeah, good manners or adab, actually came from the concept of Sunnah, and then many other things that we can deduce from the Sunnah. I remember one of our colleagues. She has done the something like the teaching of the prophets from the hadith of the prophets. She is in the FITS, yeah, fundamental interdisciplinary department, yeah. And then if we go to the Tazkiyatun Nafs, again, we have another Riyadatun Nafs, and then this perhaps we can go back to the books of spirituality, Islamic spirituality, Al-Ghazali's, Al-Isfahani, Ibn Miskawayh, and many others has suggested the method how to tazkiyah, to purify the hearts or purify the soul and the discipline of the soul. If we go back to the books of Al-Ghazali, he even label or names his method as ilmu tariqul akhirah, ilmu tariqul akhirah, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah? And this in this book, or in this way, tariq ilmu al-akhirah, I think he mentioned some ways how to go against the nafs, the jihadun nafs, again the desire, and how to make the determination, how to choose the correct way, and others. And this is, he integrated the method of Aristotle, the integrated of the hadith, muhaddithin, and others. Riyadatun Nafs, say for instance, this is a long time ago, yeah. Riyadatun Nafs by controlling the speech as one of the Ummahatul Razila, yeah, Ummahatul Razila, the excessive in speech, excessive in eating, and many others, a lot of things. If we go to the classical books, the problem now is how to apply in our days excessive of power, excessive of eating, and how to apply these days. Hubbul jah, the love of influence. This is the challenge now, and also in our educations now. We seems to not to have concrete subjects or module how to apply this, how to apply this jihadun nafs, riyadatun nafs, tazkiyatun nafs, and the others, like how to apply the ihsan, ikhlas, and taqwa in our life. So this is the spiritual pedagogy. We have to think how to apply this, how to come up with the course outline or module on how to handle this problem or tackle this problem, jihadun nafs and others. What I can see now is that what we can do in our subjects now, voluntary actions. voluntarily do something to the society. Say, for instance, this week, some of our students goes to Sungai Lui, Sepang, to do the voluntary works. So perhaps in our subjects, we should include this voluntary or voluntary actions should be done. Right now in the kulliyah or in the Department of Usuluddin, we have Islamic ethics, Islamic aqidah, and also Islamic da'wah. The lecturers were asked to do these voluntary works, and let's say the assignment to go to ask the student to do the welfare actions and welfare, to go to the society and do the welfare, and then come out with the reports or the assignment. Go to the refugee camp, go to the orphanage houses, go to the others temples, something like the worship houses of other religions, and also the soup kitchen. I mean, this is, I think, what has been done in the department so far. But we need to intensify this type of subjects, strengthen the current subject in the kulliyah. I mean, IRKH. I do not know about other kulliyah, but at least in the departments we have this. But again, this because it is given the mark, so students have to do that. But our discussion on Islamic spirituality, ikhlas, ihsan, and taqwa, I mean, yeah, it seems that it is not in line with that point. Ihsan, taqwa, and ikhlas. Since they were given the marks, they have to do that. But I know that some of us did it out of his sincerity, out of their ikhlas, and others given the foods to those who live in the town, in the city, without the shelters. They go on their own. We know that, and also the soup kitchen. We know that, and this is, I think, the spiritual pedagogy. We should intensify or strengthen our course outline, our course.
Dr. Wanazam,
yeah?
You have 1 minute left.
Okay. I thought that I'm going to be short, but it seems that I just want to mention that some approaches of the teaching of the spiritual that we have done, I think from the beginning, the university has already got this halaqah, and from the first day I joined the university in 1986, the halaqah is already there. The suhbah, the suhbah, I borrowed the term from the sunnah, sahaba, suhbah, but we apply it a different way. We go to the jungle, we go to the outside the university in ibādah camp, and we practice this where the student and the murabbi live together, and then any problems, small problems, the problem of wudu, the problem of prayer, we can correct it directly. So it is quite effective. I mean, very effective method when we do like that. But during that time, it was small number. Now we have a very large number, and the murabbi cannot functions as they were. So by that, I think I end my talk today by saying that Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Thank you very much, Dr. Wan Azam, for addressing spiritual pedagogical approaches in education lessons from Islamic heritage. You highlighted man's relations with God, with humanity, and with the universe. Ihsan, the importance of the qalb, or the spiritual heart. Ittiba' as-sunnah, as a characteristic of tahdhib al-akhlaq. The best tazkiyatun nafs is to refer to the sunnah of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Also, riyadatun nafs, you highlighted that, and you referred to a few classical scholars like Al-Ghazali and Miskawayh and others, as well as example how to apply ihsan, taqwa, and ikhlas in the face of the problems of today. For example, in the excessiveness of many aspects in life. And lastly, you highlighted that we should intensify voluntarism to tame the self in our curriculum and subjects, and consolidation or revival of the halaqah and suhbah during ibādah camps. Thank you very much, Doctor. I would like to remind again the participants to write down your questions in the chat box. We will address these towards the end of the program. Our next panelist is Assistant Professor Dr. Muhammad Farid Ali Al-Fijawi. Dr. Muhammad Farid Ali studied Usul al-Ifta under the supervision of Rais al-Mufti of the Darul Ifta, Mufti Hamidullah, before 2003, and in 2023 he pursued Masters in Islamic Civilization from ISTEC IIUM, then obtaining his doctorate with his dissertation Principles to Issue Fatwa in Hanafi Legal School, and annotated translation and analysis of Sharh Uqud Rasm al-Mufti al-Ibn Abidin Ashami. He held the position of Research Fellow at the International Institute of Advanced Islamic Studies, IIS, Malaysia from 2011 to 2013 in the area of Maqāsid al-Sharia. He served as an academic fellow at ISTEC, IIUM from 2014 and was involved in a number of translations of Arabic classical works, including the translation of Mulla Jami' 40 Hadith. He is currently attached to the Fundamental and Interdisciplinary Department KIR, KHS, Kuliah of Islamic Religious Knowledge and Human Science. Dr. Farid Ali Al-Fijawi, please welcome with your topic, Spirituality and Spiritual Pedagogy, a Maqāsidi Approach. Dr. Farid.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh.
The chairperson, Dr. Nur Jannah, thank you very much for inviting me and for the introduction. And before I will start my topic, I would like to thank our Sheikh, Professor Emeritus, Professor Dr. Muhammad Kamal Hassan. You have guided us and always encouraged us to to spirituality, and you have set the pace for us. And also I would like to thank Professor Dr. Akmal Khuzairi and our other panel, Dr. Wan Azam, and our respected doctor from education, Dr. Abdul Shakur, and I hope, because there are many important points which are already covered by the by our respected panelists. So I will try to quickly cover some points which I think were not covered, but these points are open for comments and suggestions for further development. I will start with the attention getter, that our problem, the challenge today is that disenchantment, educating about the makhluk without the creator, without the khaliq. And a good example is if we take a look at this famous program, which normally our children and people, they always watch on TV, the National Geography program. Always the final question, who created this, is omitted. The presentation is always wonderful. They tell in detail about the nature, about the animals, about the natural phenomenon. But when it comes to this last point, who created this, is never addressed. So hence, they end up championing the nature to be self-sustaining, self-evolving. And this is very common in modern Western education as well. So it is all about makhluk and nothing about the khaliq, the creator. Now, when we look at the Islamic education, it is founded on faith and spirituality. Absence of spirituality is the root cause of chaos and crisis currently we are experiencing. Modernity and rationalism without spirituality has made the world increasingly materialistic and decreasingly spiritual. So these are, I'm just giving this some important points to get our attention, why we need spiritual education. History of mankind is witness that essential nature of life is spiritual and not material. Peace, security, prosperity, equality, justice, liberty, rule of law, harmony, and peaceful coexistence cannot be realized without spiritual principles and spirituality. And the last point here, which is to get our attention, is human is not a thing to be exploited, rather a personality to be developed. Faith and spirituality recognizes the worth of the individual and disciplines them for total submission to Almighty Allah and to service for the Ummah and service for the society. So these are some important points and problems and challenges because of taking out spirituality from our from the education system, or not giving much importance to it. Now, a brief introduction or tarif or definition, what is spirituality? The presence of relationship with Allah. The presence of relationship with Allah that affects the individual's self-worth, sense of meaning, and connectedness with others and nature. So this is one of the definitions of spirituality. All right. So the presence of relationship with Allah, which we normally in Arabic, we know it as taqarrub ilallah. Taqarrub ilallah. The Prophet ﷺ is reported to have related from Almighty Allah, is a hadith Qudsi, saying, Allah says, when a slave of mine draws near to me a span, shibran, I draw near to him a cubit. When we move to Allah, we try to crave and go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala one shibr, one cubit, and Allah's mercy and Raḥmah moves towards us 2 cubit, which is and then if we move to him, what do you call, we walk to him, the mercy of Allah runs to us. Right. So now, so this is in Sahih Bukhari, it's a hadith in Sahih Bukhari, hadith number 96 in Kitab al-Muqaddimat. Now, when we talk about spirituality, there is a term which is we call it ATG, attachment to God. Attachment to God, taqarrub ilallah. The modern spiritual literature is using this term ATG, but in our Islamic what you call world, we know it is taqarrub ilallah. So ATG is attachment to God. Now, when we talk about spirituality, we have to have a attachment figure. We have to have an attachment figure. In our case, our attachment figure is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Someone to whom one can connect to. Someone who is the safe haven and source of security. Highest level of such attachment is known as faqr. These concepts have to be also introduced in our spiritual pedagogy. Of course, the modern spirituality is talking about attachment figure and attachment to God. But then the Islamic approach to this will be, we need to introduce the concept of faqr and faqir, where poverty, right, that anxious need or condition of being in utter want. When we are spiritually activated, we'll have this type of need towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is known as faqr or faqir in the Sufi discourse. Then there is another level which is also the concept of fana and fana fil fana. These also needs to be somehow incorporated when we talk about attachment figure, our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, a big challenge is, if you notice, if you go to websites and you just click spirituality, spirituality is becoming a very common what do you call trend, even in the West. What is the difference between their approach to spirituality and ours, as IIUM scholars and the Muslim scholars? I'm not a scholar, I'm still a student of Prof. Kamal Hassan. All right, so we have the problem of, I call it disenchantment of spirituality as well. This is happening now, because if you look at their literature, for the Western people and people who are not coming from Islamic worldview, for them spirituality is without God. For them, spirituality is just like self-realization. You do yoga, and just become mindful of whatever you are doing. Whether that action is right or wrong doesn't matter, but become mindful of what one is doing. Right? So, or what one is feeling. So when one is mindful of that, that is their attainment of spirituality. So there is no, and even for them, attachment figure can be a human being. Attachment figure can be other than God. All right. So that's why I call it that this is a problem that we are also facing, disenchantment of spirituality. And there are many Muslims also influenced by these ideas, that spirituality for them is, it doesn't need the concept of God. It doesn't need attachment, taqarrub ilallah. So this also have to be solved. This have to be addressed. And how we teach spirituality, we have to, the center is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have to always get it there. Right. So now, religion and spirituality in Islam is not separate. That means spirituality is synthesis of faith and good actions. iman wa amal salih. And that is the reason why Quran is saying again and again, innal ladina amanu wa amilu salihat. Iman and amal salih have to be synthesized. Then that is spirituality. We cannot do with one only. Right? So now there is another concept which is very important, and it expresses the synthesis of iman and amal salih in the Quran is the concept of bir. Right, which is Surah Baqarah, verse number 177, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talked about it is not righteousness, bir, that you turn your faces towards east or west, but it is righteousness. So if you see the whole ayah, bir is talking about iman, is talking about iman, amantu billahi wa malaikatihi wa kutubihi, in the books, in the akhirah. And then it is also talking about relationship, love, and care for the mankind. So I call it a tripartite concept. Bir is a tripartite concept of three components: believe in Allah, love for mankind. These three have to come together. And this is what we are talking about in our spirituality, if we should be achieving this. All right. Now, how do, because attachment to God, ITG, attachment figure, when we talk about attachment figure, we need to know the attributes, the sifat, the qualities of that attachment figure. And in our case, the most important thing to understand and to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Asma'ul Husna. Right? And this is the reason why our scholars like Imam Ghazali, Rahmullah ta'ala, Maqsadul Asna fi Sharhi Asma'il Husna is a very important book. And interestingly, when we talk about understanding the qualities and the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we are also supposed to emulate the attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our life on a human level. Otherwise, our shahada is not complete. We are saying we believe in Allah who is Rahman, who is Rahim, but then in our action we are not Rahim, we are not merciful to mankind and to the nature and to the environment. That means something is missing in our tasdeeq bil qalb and ikrar bil lisan. Something is missing there. All right, so that's why how to increase the love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this Asma'ul Husna is very important. And I still remember in Islam Knowledge and Civilization, there were some syllabus, some slides which covered this topic as well, to teach the students and how to apply Asma'ul Husna in our life on a human level. All right, so this is very important. So when we say love for the fellow man, that means sound actions out of mercy and benefit for the mankind. All right, so and that will happen when our love is perfect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then we will be able to also love our fellow human being and the nature and the environment. So belief in Allah, love for fellow men, all three coming together in the concept of bir. And bir is the synthesis of iman and amal saleh, and this is the spirituality which we are talking about. Now coming to the Maqāsid, we have I cannot cover all my slides. Later I will share with inshallah with Centris. I have actually about 17 slides, 14 slides, but I'll only cover important points. Now when we talk about Maqāsid Sharia, I will talk about some problems which we are facing when we deal with Maqāsid in our campus, and I do not know about outside campus, but when we teach, when we use Maqāsid in our research papers, when we are using Maqāsid in our classroom, first good news is that IIUM lecturers and researchers coming from various backgrounds, they are attempting to explore the theory and application of Maqāsid Sharia beyond the Islamic jurisprudence. Now, this is good. So there are social science, humanities, medicine, architecture, and other fields of studies taught by our various kulliyas in IIUM. They are all committed to Maqāsid theory and application. So it's not only the business of Islamic jurisprudence, fiqh and usul al-fiqh department, it is the work of the entire university. All right. So now what is the big challenge here? The big challenge is the classification of Maqāsid Sharia. Because both scholars from our fiqh and Sharia background and scholars from non-Islamic background, they tend to only master and emphasize and apply only one classification, which is very commonly known, the Daruriyat Khamsa, the 5 essentials. And to the extent that some people think that only that is Maqāsid. So this is a problem when we talk about Maqāsid in our classroom. We are not exploring, we're not going into other classifications. And this in our Islamic tradition, it is known as wajhul hasr, the purpose of classification. Every time there is something is divided into 2, into 3, into 4, there is a reason for it. There is a purpose behind that classification, and scholars have to master this so that we can explore the different classification of Maqāsid. Right? So the most common classification, which is excessively used, is the 5 essentials, Daruriyat Khamsa: protection of life, religion, intellect, family, and property. But there are some other classifications which are not commonly highlighted by the scholars, such as the objectives of the creation. So how can we do spirituality without this objective? Right? The objective of creation known as Maqāsid al-Khalq. And the 2 types. Maqāsid al-Khalq is 1, Maqāsid al-Sharia is 2. Right? So we only talk about Maqāsid al-Sharia, but we rarely talk about Maqāsid al-Khalq. So, and also Maqāsid al-Khalq is also known as Maqāsid al-Amr al-Takwini or Qasdul Khalqi, intents behind the command to create. Why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us? Why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the world, the nature, and everything? All right. So, like Surah Al-Dhariyat, Surah 51, verse 56, which all of us know. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Now, this is the purpose, the objective of creation: worship, devotion. Right. So, so when we talk about the Maqāsid of Islamic law, we cannot minus that the Maqāsid of creation. So I also see that now Maqāsid is also becoming facing the problem of disenchantment, because we are discussing Maqāsid in a very utilitarian approach. All right, we only talk about the material outcome of Maqāsid, but how that Maqāsid can take us to attachment to God, attachment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We need that discussion in our teaching, in our classroom. All right, we need to get that back into. So, and Shatibi also calls this, that to figure out the connection with that Maqāsid al-Khalq is the highest level of Maqāsid, Maqāsid al-Aliyah. Right, so devotion to Almighty Allah, His worship is amongst the higher intents of the Sharia. So even just imagine when we talk about zakat, we are just putting zakat in a preservation of wealth, and that's it. But where is that connection of zakat with our tazkiyatun nafs? Where is the discussion of zakat that it actually enhances our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, actually Allah is Raziq. Now that is the quality of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So how do we human beings become Raziq on the human level? By giving zakat. So this connection have to be explained, right? So I'll just quickly go to some missing links between Maqāsid and spirituality. The common, which I said just now, the common classification of Maqāsid into 5 essential has taken a utilitarian approach, which looks mainly towards material benefits. This is not peculiar to Maqāsid discourse. If you take a closer look, even other Islamic concepts are discussed in a very narrow worldly benefit context. And I am very thankful for centuries to getting this, the importance of spirituality in pedagogy. This is very important because if you notice properly, we are talking about Islam without emphasizing much about akhirah, without much what is the benefit of that in the akhirah. We rarely talk about it. Even when we talk about death nowadays, some lecturers, they become afraid. They say, oh, don't, this is too Sufi. Don't talk about death. Don't talk about Muraqabatul Maut and all these things. No need. Right? So this is a problem, right? So now, when we talk about Maqāsid, we also have to keep in mind that one maqsad can be wasila, means to achieve higher maqsad. So when we talk about the 5 essentials, this is a means to achieve a higher maqsad, which is devotion. All right. Similarly, some other classifications have to be into our discourse, into our classroom. For example, when we talk about the universal Maqāsid, right? So universal Maqāsid are normally, for example, it is based on text. It's not based on fiqh. When we are deriving Maqāsid from fiqh edicts, these are very specific. They are very juz'iyah. They are very khas. But when we talk about general Maqāsid, we are talking about the values of the Quran and Sunnah, which is universal. For example, when we talk about preservation of fitrah, right, the pure natural disposition, orderliness, equality, freedom, maintaining human dignity, rights, tazkiyatun nafs is actually a universal maqsad, right? Calling for cooperative world, developing civilization on earth, Imran, and all these are universal purpose, universal maqsad, which are actually based on Quran and Sunnah, right? So these are also can be very easily used by kulliyas and faculties which are not dealing directly with fiqh issues, right? So now just quickly, then I will end my presentation. Maqāsid approach helps us to differentiating between changing means and the absolute ends. There are many verses, even the hadith, they are actually in the level of means, they are not ends. So Maqāsid approach helps us to understand the message, the spirit of the text, the Quran and Sunnah, the nusus, right? Multi-dimensional understanding of opposing evidence. When we have Maqāsid approach, then we are having multi-dimensional understanding of the text. And it's easy for us to reconcile the opposing evidences. Universality of Sharia across culture. Maqāsid approach helps us, right? That we can look into to read and interpret narrations in terms of higher moral purposes rather than norms in their own right, right? So without Maqāsid approach, the ijtihad will lead to application of divine guidance in a reductionist manner rather than holistic, literal rather than moral, right? So these are some important points. And the last important point, and I think this is very important before I give it back to the our chairperson. Al-Raisuni, in his introduction to Maqāsid Sharia, has a very interesting point. He divides the Muslims into three types. Number one, mutadayyin. That Muslim who is concerned about his religion. He wants to become mutadayyin. He wants to become religious. So how does Maqāsid approach help this Muslim? And he gives the example of zakat there in his book. He says that when we know the purpose, the Quran says why we give zakat, because zakat is going to cleanse our shuh from ourselves and also cleanse our wealth. Now, when the mutadayyin will understand this maqsad, he will pay zakat on time. He will do the calculation of zakat perfectly. So Maqāsid approach helps the mutadayyin, a religious person, to perform his ibādah, his devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala perfectly. All right, so this is the benefit for mutadayyin. Second type of Muslim are faqih, scholars. Why do they need to know Maqāsid? Why do they need to apply the Maqāsid approach? Because this will prevent them from rigidity and stagnation. Right now, we are missing creativity in our ijtihad, in our understanding, in applying the text, right? Applying the rules. We are very dry. We are so literal. We are still trying to apply the medieval Islam in today's world. And this is the reason why new generation doesn't want to talk to us, because they think we are not solving their problems. All right? So for the faqih, for the scholars, this is a reason why he needs to know Maqāsid, so that he can have that type of flexibility. He can be creative and avoid rigidity and stagnation. And the last one, Al-Raisuni said, the third type of Muslim are da'i, the one who does the da'wah, who calls and spreads the message of Islam. Why does he or she needs to know Maqāsid? Because to make our da'wah full of wisdom, basira, and hikmah, we need to know Maqāsid. What is permanent, what is changing means, what is and all this we have to know as a da'i, so that our da'wah can become creative, right? So if you see properly, all these three types of Muslims, we all fit. IIUM lecturers, we fit in all these three categories. We fit, we are supposed to, like our Ustad, our Sheikh said, the Islamization of self. Mutadayyin, he needs to know the Maqāsid so that he can perfect his ibādah, he can perfect his devotion. We are also scholars, and we are responsible to lead the world. And this is the reason why we need to understand Maqāsid, so that we can become creative, we can have community engagement, and we can give that solution, creative solutions to the world. And the last one, we are all da'i. We are Muslim, we need to send the message, we need to spread the message of Islam. Otherwise, we are not perfect Muslims. We are not dynamic if we don't do da'wah. It's not only the job of the Tabligh people. It's the Tabligh movement, it's not only their job. It's responsibility of every lecturer in this university. Right? So you can see the Maqāsid approach is taking us back to that bir concept. In a better manner, it is helping us to understand the spirit of Quran and Sunnah, and so that we can perfect, synthesize amal, iman, and amal saleh. And with this, I end. Wa akhri da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
Thank you very much, Dr. Farid, for your very interesting presentation. If I may summarize, I have three things that I need to summarize here for everybody's benefit. Thank you very much, Dr. Farid. Spirituality you have stressed in terms of taqarrub ilallah as the solutions to the crisis of humanity and the environment of today, whereby we have to inculcate this feeling of faqir towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The problem of disenchantment For example, makhluk, we stress on makhluk without the khaliq, even to the point of disenchantment of spirituality, especially of today, whereby spirituality has been viewed without religiosity. Islamic spirituality is a synthesis of iman and amal saleh, as illustrated by the ayat in Surah Al-Baqarah on al-birr, whereby we have three tripartite characteristics here: faith with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and love for mankind. We have to nurture the attachment to Allah through internalizing the meaning of al-Asma'ul Husna in our personality and action, i.e. In dispensing mercy and benefits for others. The challenge of classification of Maqāsid today with the missing links. For example, we emphasize on Maqāsid al-Sharia and forgetting about Maqāsid al-Akhlaq, Maqāsid al-Khalq, which is the highest of Maqāsid according to your presentation. We also have, according to you, disenchantment of Maqāsid, which the view on Maqāsid as being quite utilitarian, devoid of spirituality. And lastly, you highlighted Raisuni's message, whereby Maqāsid approaches should help Muslims of three types. Number one, those who are concerned about religion, wanting to be religious. Second, for the scholars, to prevent them from rigidity and stagnation. And thirdly, for the da'i, so that they have wisdom in da'wah. Thank you very much, Dr. Farid. Now I would like to, or before that, I would like to remind our participants to write down your questions in the chat box. And our last panelist, but of course not in the least, is Associate Professor Dr. Abdul Shakur Duncan Preece. Let me introduce him to you. He obtained his bachelor's degree from University of Central England, Birmingham, and a PhD in education from the IIUM. The areas of his specialization are education, educational supervision and management of primary and secondary schools, linguistics and literature, applied linguistics, pedagogy, including teaching methodologies for content and language subjects, blended learning, hikmah pedagogy, and philosophical inquiry. Among his articles are Muslim Andalusia, New Insights into Linguistic and Literary Exchanges between the East and the West, and the concept of murabbi in Muslim education with reference to selected teaching methods of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One of his projects that I would like to highlight is the analysis of the unique curriculum of an Islamic school in Dubai, a qualitative study. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Dr. Abdul Shakur Preece with your address on bringing the Islamic spiritual pedagogical heritage to practical relevance in the 21st century. Dr. Abdul Shakur, welcome.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Can you hear me? Because I've plugged in my earphones. I want to make sure the sound is good. Is that okay? I'll take it out and see if that's better. How is that better now? Is it louder now or before? I can't hear you.
Now it's better.
It's better now. Okay, so I'll scrap the earphones. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, everybody, respected colleagues, scholars, and participants. I'd like to share my PowerPoint, so I'm going to try and do that now. Hopefully you can see it. Is it visible?
Yes.
Can you see my PowerPoint? Yes, you can.
Yeah.
Okay. So, spirituality and pedagogy, sharing reflections. 2 rak'ah prayed with love are better than 1,000 without. It's a nice Sufi saying that perhaps says something about what spirituality might be for some people. And I'm just a practitioner. I'm speaking as a practitioner of acquired knowledge. You know, English language teaching, curriculum and instruction are my areas of expertise. And so I wanted to sort of identify the focus of today and the audience of today. I'm speaking to you as teachers and lecturers, tertiary level education, formal education, so in the classroom, in the university, but it could be online, it could be face-to-face, and we're looking at pedagogy and spirituality. So this is what we're talking about, and who I'm talking to, I hope. And so everything that I say will hopefully make sense to you. Let's move on fast because we're limited on time. So pedagogy and the curriculum, Tyler has a model which has 4 components, which we can see here: aims, goals, objectives, subject matter and content, learning experiences, and evaluation. So when if we want to spiritualize that, or Islamize that, or Islamicize that, how do we do it? Because there are problems with this model for us as Muslims. Critical thinking, problem solving, and value acquiring processes cannot be plainly declared in behavioral objectives. So behavioral objectives are limited to what you can see and what you can measure. But of course, spirituality is not visible. So Tyler's model has some problems for us. We can use it as a model, but we have to maybe adapt it. And some people have tried. This is a Western attempt. It's, I think, it looks like an Israeli or Hebrew. Someone's thought about trust and truth and other spiritual dimensions. So that's a Western attempt at spiritualizing Tyler. This is, I think, from our own university. It's an attempt at Islamizing ELT, I think. And we've got objectives, knowledge, experiences, purpose. And I just want to hide this toolbar if I can. Is the toolbar in the way of the PowerPoint for you?
No, it's clear.
It's not. Okay, so it's just me that's having a problem with it. So this is someone's attempt, I think, in IIUM to Islamize Tyler's model and for English language, looking at the purpose. How do we measure things like spiritual aptitude? Moving on to my thoughts about it, because if we take these elements of Tyler, philosophy, content and learning experiences, evaluation and assessment, we can actually see that our aims and goals and objectives are guided by Islam, Iman, Ihsan. You know, if we look on the right, we have those elements of Islam, which are obviously reflected in our aims and our goals and our objectives. So that's our philosophical approach to the curriculum and to teaching. The content and the learning experiences, well, we have traditional and modern. You know, we have traditional Islamic approach, we have modern pedagogies. And then I think the Sajatra framework is talking about applying this knowledge into the world, into the community. So applying an action. And of course, adab, akhlaq, values are important for us as believers. Community-based education is what we're now talking about, and applying it to those around us. Project-based learning, problem solving. These are some of the thoughts, or this is the way that we relate Islam, Iman, Ihsan to Tyler, if you like. And then finally, evaluation and assessment. Well, we've got inward and outward. You know, we've got the inward spiritual aspect, which we may want to try and evaluate in some way. And we have the outward aspect. So this is, if you like, an overview of what I've been thinking about in this topic. Now, if we move to educational psychology, we have Bloom, and Bloom, of course, has his 6 levels of critical thinking. And so can we integrate spirituality with Bloom? And if so, where would it go? And I think if you look at this model, you can see that it probably ought to go everywhere. You know, when we're remembering something, it could be remembering Quran, it could be remembering Allah, it could be remembering mathematical formulas, but we could actually integrate spiritual and acquired knowledge together. When we're evaluating something, we might be evaluating an essay that a student has written, or we might be evaluating ourselves and our behavior. So I think the idea of combining Bloom for acquired knowledge and for spirituality is an interesting idea, which we ought to think about. So a couple of questions. Is spirituality at the top of Bloom? I think I've probably already answered that, because I used to think that, okay, we've got Bloom's taxonomy and at the top of it is spirituality. But on further reflection, I thought, well, no, it actually should come all the way through, not just at the end or not just at the top. Can faith and intention elevate mundane acts to spiritual ones? So that's an interesting question, which I wish we could discuss. Maybe we will. But you do a simple act like aerobics, but when you have an intention to pray, that aerobics or that yoga can become prayer, if you see what I mean. I always remember going to Umrah and walking around the Kaaba and thinking, I'm now doing ibādah. But when I go outside and I walk around the shops, I'm not doing ibādah. So what's the difference? I'm still walking around. But when I'm walking around the shops, I'm intending to buy something. When I'm walking around the Kaaba, I'm intending to worship Allah. So I think it's fascinating how, in Islam, when we say Bismillah, when we eat, then, we have a barakah in our food. When we do any act, we remember Allah, and in so doing, inshallah, we elevate it and hopefully make it spiritual. So I think it's a fascinating idea. But of course, there are different views about spirituality. We have the inward and we have the outward. In language, we say language is caught and not taught. And perhaps spirituality is also in some way acquired rather than given. And I think the different views, if you see the ideas here on the left and right, we've got spirituality as something mysterious and God-given, ilm al-laduni, something that Khidr said, or was it Musa who said, I think it was Khidr who said, it's knowledge that Allah has given me. Transmission, by suluk, it cannot be measured, standardized, or assessed. So this is one idea or view of spirituality, something personal. On the other hand, we have people, ourselves included, who are trying to make a balanced education, spiritual. PEPSI stands for physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual, intellectual. So we're trying to instill spirituality and faith into acquired knowledge, into our teaching. We're trying to develop good habits and values. We're trying to develop Islamic goals and objectives and content, as I said earlier. We're trying to, and some believe that spirituality can be seen indirectly, that we can make a religiosity scale and measure the intangibles. I know one of our professors is working on, Professor Sahari Nordin is working on this. So some would say it can be observed indirectly, and it can be promoted and developed, while others would say, no, it's personal, it's mysterious. So these are different views, and the truth perhaps lies somewhere in the middle. So we've got some attempts at methods and approaches towards spiritual pedagogy around us. People that we know, the Tarbiyah project is a famous one. Khalīfah project of Muhammad al-Mahdi, who I met, Allah yarham. Islamization of knowledge by Al-Atas, Ulul Albab, Minister of Education, Integrated Science, Noor Jannah. I believe you have a textbook which you have worked on, and I'm excited to know more about it. Methods like Prof. Malik Badri's Tafakkur, linking the creation to the creator, as our previous speaker was talking about. Hikmah pedagogy by Prof. Rosnani, she's trying to instill Islamic values, faith, spirituality by discussion. We have the Prophets method by our colleague, Dr. Wan Mazwati, which I will talk a little bit more about if I have time. Love pedagogy by Chet Noraini. Islam and ELT was something Akram Sa'aduddin tried to develop. He had stories of the prophets and the Sahaba in English language textbooks. And as I mentioned, we have Prof. Sahari on his IMET Center trying to develop a religiosity scale that we have also one from UPM. So These are some attempts and some projects, some approaches that exist, which are interesting. But of course, the problem we face is that in the 21st century, our students are not like the students of the past, and we are not like the scholars of the past. We're teaching online nowadays. Students have a short attention span. Students don't read. They have handphones and social media. We're westernized in a lot of our lives and thinking. We want instant gratification, and we're in an institution. We're standardizing. Are we dehumanizing? Some may say yes, and some may say no. But these are some of the challenges that we face when we want to instill spirituality and faith. And here is a very traditional approach to teaching or to pedagogy. The first part of knowledge is intention, then listening, then understanding, then memorization, then acting upon it, then spreading it. So will this work for our 21st century students, I wonder? Or do we need to change something? Do we need another approach? The Prophet's method, as I earlier said, this is a very interesting research done by Dr. Wan Mazwati, where they took from hadith and from seerah 10 techniques that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ used with the Sahaba, and then they narrowed it down to 6. And they did a research on different students from different backgrounds, some of them non-Muslim, and I think they were teaching them Malay. And a lot of these students were not interested to come to class. They were not interested in studying. They had a very negative attitude. And by applying these 6 techniques, giving reward, discouraging bad behavior, giving praise, encouraging good, raising self-confidence, dealing with bad behavior, by doing what the Prophet did, they actually got amazing results. They had students scoring. They had students coming to the teacher's house for extra tuition. They had a complete turnaround. And I think it's an exciting research, which perhaps you ought to look into. So there's an example of a method that can elevate and works. Now, this is a graphic representation of what's called communicative inquiry. Professor Rosnani, my teacher, she developed a method called Hikmah pedagogy. And essentially, as you can see here, the students sit around in a circle with the teacher, and they discuss issues, stories, questions. And I'm proposing that this could also work for Quran, Hadith, and stories where the students themselves read and make questions and discuss. So it's a method, I think, a pedagogy that is powerful, that has value, has potential. We're actually doing a bit of a touch and go here. Now, this is Mullah Nasruddin, and there's an example of a story, Eat My Fur Coat. I'm sure you may have heard of him and his story and the stories related to values, akhlaq, faith. And Prophet Rastani used this story for her students, and we'll briefly look at it. Hujja was invited out to dinner. He went in his old clothes, and nobody was interested in him. When he found a few minutes to spare, he rushed home and collected his fur coat. When he came back, he was treated with great respect. Everybody wanted to speak to him. When they sat down for dinner, he said, "Eat my fur coat, eat." And he explained to the curious people, if this regard is for my coat, it must also eat. So of course, the point here is, well, there are several points, and you want the students to read this, to make questions about it, and then to discuss it. So I do believe that is, an interesting method for discussing values, discussing faith, developing spirituality. So I'm putting it out there. And maybe we need a middle way between the traditional pedagogy and the modern pedagogy. Me as a practitioner in acquired knowledge, I can benefit from the traditional elements. Spiritual practices, we need those. Good habits, we should instill those. Punctuality, honesty, in our students. inspiring using spiritual content, remembering akhirah. These are crucial. And being a role model as a teacher, you know, muhasabah. These elements from our heritage are invaluable. Ta'deeb, to avoid arrogance, and the narrative approach. You know, the Quran is full of stories. The Prophet ﷺ told us stories. And then, as I mentioned, the Prophet's method. So we can see how these elements, if we could bring them into a science class, if we could bring them into a language class, they're definitely going to have an effect on the students, inshallah. But if we look at the modern pedagogy, we've got instructional technology, we've got high order thinking and critical thinking, we've got learner-centeredness, we've got independent learning, group and collaboration, group work and collaboration, engaging tasks and activities, alternative assessment, peer evaluation and reflection. And I'm going to leave the last one because of time, but I think we can see that if we could blend in some way these different concepts, these different approaches, these different pedagogies, we may have, inshallah, you know, good results. I wanted to play a song. Let's see if you can hear it. I don't know if you could hear, I hope you could hear that. Could you hear that?
No.
Oh, you couldn't. How sad. Never mind.
We have 2 minutes left, Dr. Shakur.
All right, well, I will move fast then. So here are some of my tips for my teachers, because I teach teachers and I have some Islamic education students too. And so we can see here, this would be my summary really of the tips for them. Exemplifying, you know, we have to set a good example. We have to be role models. Inspire, you know, we have to uplift our students with inspiring concepts, inspiring thoughts. Socratic discussion is useful. Engagement, we have to have variety in our classes. We have to have stimulation. Independent learning, because when we're not there, we want our students to continue, don't we? We don't want them to do it when we're there and stop when we're gone. So we've got to build their dynamo or their battery and give them practice to be independent and to learn by themselves, for themselves. Positive reinforcement from the Prophet's method, as we said, it's a key actually for children as well as for adults. Appreciating our students. Alternative assessment, rather than just you know, final exams, we need to have projects, we need to have applying the knowledge in community and acting on our knowledge. And finally, learning objectives. We must always start with learning objectives. I put it last as a point really, that it should be first. You know, we start with what is our objective, what is our aim, and we design our learning and our teaching based on that. So in that case, I will jump through the question. I have a bunch of questions, but I'm going to end with a thought, which is 2 thoughts or 2 quotes. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ described Abu Bakr as-Siddiq as explaining to the people his status over the rest of them. He said, he does not surpass you by performing more prayers and fasts. There are among you those who pray and fast more, but by something which is deeply embedded in his heart. So that says something about our aim for our students. And this one, I think, is a bit of encouragement for us because, you know, the times we live in are challenging. So the Prophet ﷺ said, verily you are in a time when one who leaves a tenth, what he has been commanded is ruined. Then there will be a time when one who practices a tenth of what has been commanded is saved. And so I think for spirituality and pedagogy of acquired knowledge in the 21st century, we do what we can and we rely on the Raḥmah of Allah. So I will leave you with those thoughts, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abdul Shakur, for your thought-provoking presentation. You began your presentation with, a question on can faith and intention elevate mundane activities to spiritual ones? And you also had a question on a challenge whether standardization of assessment is dehumanizing, and that's a very interesting point. Also, you stressed on, you gave some tips for pedagogy and spirituality. Number one is to exemplify, then to inspire, then to have discussions and engagements, and then independent learning, positive reinforcement, alternative assessment, and learning objectives. Thank you very, very much. Now it is time to look at the questions posted by the audience. We have around 40 minutes of question and answer time, if we were to stick to our timing. Right, let's look at the questions. We have a few. All right, but before that, let me just remind all of you that a link has been given in our chat box, and this link is the link to our Google Drive, whereby the presenters, the panelists, can upload your presentation into this drive, and the participants can then access your material from the same drive. All right, first question from Prof. Aslam Hanif for Prof. Kamal Hassan. Assalamu alaikum, Prof. For knowledge, KRKHS has categorized the process into two: Islamization or Islamicization and relevantization. However, when it comes to the self, only Islamization is put forward. Would it be more effective to use another term, especially for those from the Turath sciences, as the common perception is that religious scholars are already examples of Islamicized selves? I do not know what term could be used, but one that can also be used equally for those in the human knowledge side. Prof. Kamal?
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Prof. Aslam is a very good question. I also never thought about this, but it's good that you brought it up, that the term Islamization or Islamicization of the self seems to be relevant or confined to the people in the human sciences, and people in the revealed knowledge deal with relevantization. I was thinking, I wonder if we use the term, say, tazkiyah of self, would that cover both? Instead of, say, Islamization of self, of the self. So instead of using Islamization, we use the Arabic word for instead of Islamization, and that perhaps will bring both revealed knowledge people and the human sciences under one roof, because the Prophet ﷺ, one of the prophetic missions is وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ, yeah, يُزَكِّيهِمْ, and then وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. So tazkiyah of the people, whether they are religious or from non-religious sciences, both are subjected to process of tazkiyah. But you will have to adjust, well, to the religious background. The tazkiyah would have to be amended somewhat because of the context and the background of the individual involved. The other terminology that can be used is spirituality of the self. But then some people might claim, well, people in revealed knowledge have undergone the spiritualization of themselves. So spirituality or spiritualization of the self may not be suitable, because that would leave again the people in human sciences. So I was wondering maybe the tazkiyah of the self would be more acceptable, and maybe we in centuries will have to discuss this, because we use Islamization of the self. There is Islamization of human knowledge, and then there is Islamization of the self. So maybe you have Islamization of human knowledge for revealed knowledge, for the acquired knowledge disciplines, and then we have relevantization for revealed knowledge. But when it comes to the to the self, we seem to have left out the revealed knowledge people, as though they have already been spiritualized, or the other word is ethicalized. I don't know if that that too is not maybe not suitable, although Professor Anis Ahmad in Pakistan, he prefers maybe ethicalization rather than Islamization of knowledge. If Prof. Aslam is there, maybe he could give some thoughts on this idea of using tazkiyah of self, which would cover both categories of academics. Is Prof. Aslam there?
No, he is not. But Prof, I was, if the audience can allow the moderator, the MC, to also. Please. Yeah, I was thinking that Islamization of the self would apply for both, because remember, Al-Ghazali mentioned that the person who is most gullible in terms of deceptions by shaitan is the one who has knowledge. Although knowledge should be making us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The one who suffer from spiritual diseases, scholars are very much gullible. So perhaps Islamization of the self applies to both camps. Allahu a'lam. If anybody else from our panelists would like to respond, please go ahead.
Maybe Dr. Farid.
Yeah.
Yes, Ustad, our Sheikh, Tazkiyatun Nafs is a term which actually now many, even our contemporary scholars, they even agreed that it is a universal purpose, Maqāsid, which is supported by the Quran and Sunnah, and the whole idea of Prophet ﷺ's tarbiyah of the Sahabi is Tazkiyatun Nafs. So it all will be, whether someone is from religious studies or not religious studies, all have to go for this type of tarbiyah of Tazkiyatun Nafs.
Thank you very much. We have another question here by a student. There's no direction to the question to anyone in particular, so I suppose everybody can pitch in. Any panel member. We see Ibadah Camp is a short-term program that inculcates spiritual values in our students, just like motivational camps. Therefore, is there any possible system or program that are intended to polish the students' spirituality in the long term, rather other than voluntarism program as mentioned? This is from a student, Naimullah. Anyone who would like to respond to this? Perhaps Dr. Wan Azam or Prof. Dr. Abdul Shakur?
I think the answer is no. There isn't anything. But perhaps there could be. And the thought that occurs to me is halaqa, you know, having a sort of a circle of, as I mentioned about the community of inquiry. I do actually feel that that could be a method that we could use related to, you know, spirituality and Islamic revealed knowledge. You know, it's been done for Western philosophical content. So if we could then bring in Islamic revealed knowledge and Islamic content, I think that could have great potential. And the reason I say that is because when you discuss with other people something, you know, it's not a two-way, it's not a one-way process, it's not a two-way process, it's a multi-way process. And you hear other people's views, other people's ideas, and you're able to contribute your own. It then gives you some kind of ownership. So unlike a lecture where you listen passively, you know, in that forum, you are actually a participant. And that's therefore more likely to touch your head and touch your heart. There's more chance that it may affect you, that you, and I mean, the hope is that you would take those issues, those questions, go home and continue thinking about them. You know, you don't just stop at the discussion, you go home. And that's actually what I found. I use this method in English language teaching. We were doing a community of inquiry with stories, having embedded Islamic values and concepts. And I got students telling me, you know, I've been thinking about this question for 2 weeks. Or this question has really changed me, you know, in my thinking. So perhaps that strategy, that hikmah pedagogy could be implemented more widely. And inshallah, it could have some impact for our students, for our lecturers. That's my hope.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amtu Shakur. Dr. Wanazam, do you want to respond to that question?
Yeah, I mean the ibadah camp, I think the most effective methods of pedagogy, yeah, because it has already proven in our history of the university, and but how to quantify it, then that is the problems. I mean, right now we have the extension of ibadah camp. I mean, some of the cliques have already done this. I mean, but they did on their own. They are doing on their own. They go to the homeless people. They go to the orphanage house, homes, and so on, using their own money. And if perhaps we can try to ask the student to join, and we can give the marks for that. I mean, as part of assignment and so on. And the other thing is that right now the university is recognizing the waqaf al-khidmat, I think, or whether it is still there or not. But in our APAR, I think last years we have this waqaf al-khidmat. Then I think it can also be done in that section, I think. So both of students and lecturers can benefit from it, I think. So we can continuously practice the ibadah camp, even though it's using the other names. So that is my views.
Thank you very much. Dato' Hamidun, would you like to respond to that question? You raised your hand.
Assalamualaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Sorry, I just would like to chip in about the last question. Prof. Kamal, thank you very much for a very illuminating talk. Alhamdulillah. Just a wee addition to that is that right now I think we are prepared to launch our UIA 1 in next semester, which is Usra in Action, whereby it will be a regular thing for the student who asked the question. It will be a regular thing, and your usra will be concerned about reaching out to the community, practicing all the manifestations of your spiritual strength or weakness. Wallahu alam bisawab. So that is one thing. Inshallah, it will be
That's
catered for.
wonderful.
On a motorbike.
I'm very, very happy to hear that. And a motorbike, of course, with Prof. Hamidun leading.
Inshallah. Yeah, our group has been going to Ululangat and so on. So I could join them because I was in Kedah. The other thing, Prof. Kamal, sorry to chip in, Dr. Nurjana. Prof. Kamal, is that perhaps the quandary that we are in now, that we could not really put effective action in putting pedagogical steps, right? Because I think we have to go back Al-Ghazali, as you said, the malikat al-Insāniyyat, the faculties of insan, of physic, of aql, of qalb, of nafs, and of ruh. If we can identify these things and its scope and its limitation, then perhaps we can also design the strategies and the techniques to achieve this. For example, of the heart, how do we make the heart soft? You were mentioning about the 11 bawaba that nafs amaratun bisu can go in, but how do we go through that that what they call the wall of nafs to reach into Al-Ghazali called the kunhi akhdar of the qalb, the depth of the qalb, and make it felt transparent, make it be aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all the time. Because the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has prescribed the things that will soften your heart is the qira'at al-Quran and also the zikr.
We lost you, Dr. His line is not very stable. I think
So I think we have to sit down and really look at the cognitive aspect. They have the affective aspect. I will end this up. And then we ask cognitive philosopher. I will leave it there. I've done the other thing. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hamidun. Appreciate it very much. Next question is from Dr. Zahid Zamri. Assalamu alaikum, Prof. I guess this is, oh, sorry. Assalamu alaikum, Prof. Wan, to Dr. Wan Azam. Can you please elaborate more on Al-Ghazali's concept of golden mean or wasatiyah in relation to issues surrounding statecraft, politics, leaders, citizens relationship? Dr. Wan Azam?
Golden means of Al-Ghazali, it is quite a long theory, but I think it is taken from Aristotle ideas of the theory of the soul, and also the golden mean also used by Aristotle, and Ghazali's integrated it with the Quranic verses and hadith, and it seems that it goes in all of his ideas in his framework. So it's quite difficult to answer in a very short time, but I think there are many books talking about this. I would only suggest the book by Abul Qasim, The Ethics of Al-Ghazali, Umaruddin, Ethical Theory of Al-Ghazali, something like that, and many others, many others, because it seems that it has been integrated with the Quranic verses and the hadiths from Aristotle, perhaps, and it's evolved in Islamic discussion, and some of them we teach that in Islamic ethics, subject of Islamic ethics, subject of Islamic Aqidah, if I'm not mistaken, but very brief, because if you want to go for detail, then it will go to the political science, we'll go to the many other subjects. So what I can say is that it is integrated by Al-Ghazali. And of course, Al-Ghazali didn't take from Aristotle alone, but also from his predecessors like Al-Bakillani, Raghib al-Isfahani, and many others. So it's quite a big question for me because in a short time of question and answers, I think I cannot answer it in detail. So thank you very much. Perhaps we can discuss more, I mean, outside this webinar.
Maybe another webinar.
Yeah.
Inshallah. Thank you very much, Dr. Wanazam. There are 3 questions from Prof. Suhaimi Muhammad Sarif. One is for Prof. Kamal, but I think he has a little break there. So I'll proceed with the one for Dr. Farid. How to insert spirituality into Maqāsid al-Khams? Sharia bankers, I thought it was a name, Sharia bankers comply to Maqāsid in offering banking products, but how much spirituality obtained by consumers? Dr. Farid?
Yeah, it's a big question. I call it, it needs a full discussion, but I will just briefly answer. I call it triangulation. You see, when we talk about Sharia normally in IIUM context, and that's how it should be. Sharia here we are using as a synonym to Islam, as deen, as a complete Islam, not only a legal aspect. So it's a divine guidance. Now the divine guidance, it is having 3 components, which we normally teach in the class. The ahkamul i'tiqadiyya, ahkamul akhlaqiyya, and ahkamul which is fiqh, the mu'amalat. So the 3 components, right now scholars sometimes they only stick to the field, the component which is related to their field. For example, when the scholars in fiqh and usul al-fiqh, they are only concentrating on fiqh, which is mu'amalat, which is only one small part, one juz of the entire Islam. Then sometimes Sufis, they are only stuck with their ahkamul akhlaqiyya, the guidance which are related to akhlaq and human development. And sometimes some scholars are only stuck to this tawheed and very in a strict manner, so they are only stuck with the ahkamul i'tiqadiyya. Now, what we are supposed to do is that we are supposed to triangulate. How do we talk about zakat? How do we talk about bay' transaction, where we relate it to also ahkamul i'tiqad, ahkamul akhlaq, and also fiqh mu'amalat. So these 3, when we can connect these 3 components together, then we are talking about a holistic understanding of Islam, holistic application of Islam. All right, so this is what actually spirituality is supposed to do. So right now, if I am doing business, it's not only about making money and profit, it is also about applying the akhlaq, the Prophet's akhlaq, which is including amānah, staying away from deception, from deceiving, and then at the same time making Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, achieving Allah's radha, all right, and how it is related to our aqidah. All right, for example, when we talk about riba, for example, so we always, whenever we talk about riba, we forget the point that actually the biggest reason for prohibition of riba is that it challenges Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Injustice, society injustice, social injustice is there. But the first point is that it challenges Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's a matter of aqidah. So you can see, so this is why I call it triangulation, or might be some other word can be used for it. That how do we synergize and synthesize these three components of the Sharia so that we have this holistic understanding of Islam. So this is how I see it. So I hope I have answered the question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Farid. The question for Prof. Kamal from Prof. Suhaimi again. How to operationalize Islamization of the self and Islamization of knowledge, of human knowledge, in multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary context? Prof. Kamal?
Yeah. How to operationalize Islamization?
IOS and IOHK in multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary contexts.
Multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary. Well, that's tough. Well, I don't know the answer, but the thing is that in our discourse on Islamization of knowledge, either at disciplinary or interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary, we tend to go straight into the knowledge issues per se. We tackle epistemological questions. I think we need to start with the spiritual issues first, the Islamization of the self, so that whether you do a multi-disciplinary approach or transdisciplinary approach, you do not neglect the spiritual foundation in addition to the epistemological issues, and that would be to me a methodological approach. But how to operationalize? Well, I guess it depends on the areas that you are dealing with, and each area will have to be, this issue will have to be contextualized to the area concerned. Maybe if he is around, he could explain further so that I can understand better. If Dr. Suhaimi is around, then he could explain better, maybe.
I'm not sure if he's around. Let me check. I don't seem to see his name. Maybe he was here and he has a class perhaps. Okay. So he's not in the list of participants at the moment. So shall we move on?
From the Kuliah of Economics, Dr. Suhaimi from Kuliah of Economics?
I'm not sure.
Oh, okay, fine.
All right, shall we move on?
Yeah, okay.
All right, thank you very much, Prof. The next question is for Dr. Wan Azam. How could spirituality being taught in various academic disciplines can merely being critical about human capital theory for lack of humanizing sufficient?
I think the key concept here is ihsan, taqwa, and also the ihsan, ikhlas. These three key concepts, I think, can go into any any of our actions, whether we do it sincere for the sake of God, ihsan, whether when we perform the actions in any of our daily activities or in any of our actions, do we feel that God is watching us? And taqwa, inna akramakum indallahi attaqakum, do we have the God fearing when we are doing something? I think this is a basic Islamic spirituality that we can bring along in our actions, and therefore we have other rulings. For instance, when it's come under sunat, then it is already accepted. When it is wajib, it is already, I mean, we go everywhere and then we bring these 5 legal values or rulings, then I think it is already fulfilled the Islamic spirituality and the ibādah itself, worship Allah as though we seeing Him. And of course, we cannot see God, but in our daily activities, make the put into our mind, put into our heart that Allah is watching us, then it is already Islamic spirituality. I think I answer your questions.
All right. How about the second part of the question, Dr. Wan Azam? Can merely being critical about human capital theory for lack of humanizing sufficient?
I cannot get what the answer wants about that. I think I cannot get the
question.
The answer. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Wan Azam. There's one question here from Asma. How to solve? And she doesn't indicate who to answer. So I suppose anybody can pitch in. How to solve the problem of teachers who are very strict to their students with no ihsan, but they are not strict to themselves? Perhaps Dr. Farid would like to respond to this.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. The teachers, we are all lecturers here, and the verse of the Surah Baqarah applies to us as well. Lima taquluna ma la taf'alun. That why you want to ask others to do things which we don't do ourselves. So if we want to teach ihsan to our students, we are supposed to show them ihsan through our actions. So and like our Dr. Abdul Shakur, he presented that there are different methods where he presented Dr. Wan's Sunnah method of teaching spirituality, which also talks about that is not only one method to be strict, it takes different combination. Sometimes we can be strict, sometimes we can be flexible, sometimes we if a student if he can improve himself by giving him hadiyah, a gift, then we use that method. If he is such a student who never listens, then he needs scolding, then we need to scold him. If he needs to receive a fatherly type of affection, then take him out for a coffee and then talk to him. So the tarbiyah, there are many methods. It's not only one method, and hikmah is to understand which will be the most effective method. So I think this is very important for the teachers, for us to take care of this issue.
Thank you very much, Dr. Farid. There's no more question in the list, but I would like to go to our participants. We have at least 2 participants from the United States, from this Legacy International Online High School. We have Dr. Susan Douglas as well as Brother Zahir Arastu. Would you like to say anything, or would you like to ask any question, Dr. Susan or Brother Zahir? I suppose not. Okay, we have, oh.
In case they don't have anything, I would like to add a couple of things.
Sure, thank you.
Sort of in response, adding to what our participants have, our lecturers have said already. You know, the question of I think the tough question that Prof. Kamal got about operationalizing, you know, he did very well, I think, to struggle with that one. And then spiritual, you know, the other one about multidisciplinary. I think my answer, and then the one about spirituality and different disciplines. I think we need to inspire our students and each other. You know, I think we need to uplift our students' faith with concepts that are inspiring. And I want to give an example of one that that was given to me about, and this is actually from a Sufi sheikh. He said, imagine a bird in a tree on a desert island, surrounded by the sea. He said, the eye of the bird is all the problems of mankind, and the sea is the Raḥmah of Allah. And so, you know, by painting that picture, you suddenly realize that the Raḥmah of Allah, the mercy of Allah, is so vast, and the problems that we face are so small. You know, and if we have that concept in our mind, we are uplifted and we are reminded that yes, we must have faith, we must have tawakkul. Another example that I used to give my students when I was a primary teacher, you know, snowflakes, maybe you haven't seen them over here, but if you snowflake under a microscope, it has a beautiful pattern, a mathematical geometric pattern. And here's the amazing thing, each snowflake has a unique pattern. And how many millions and billions of snowflakes are there? So how great is Allah's creation and knowledge? And lastly, and I'll share this one from my friend who converted to Islam. He said, one of the things that he was thinking about science and how in the natural world, when you freeze something, it contracts. When you heat it, it expands. But water is different. Water, when it freezes, it expands. And he said, were it not the case, it would have sunk and killed all the fish. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his wisdom and might made it float. And therefore it became less dense, and therefore the life was able to survive. So, you know, these amazing things around us, like our colleague, Dr. Muhammad Farid said, you know, we the programs, we need to make that connection, you know, with the creator and the creation. And so by sharing these concepts with our students, by inspiring them, by reminding them, I think, you know, in English, in science, in maths, in economics, in law, you know, we can reignite, restart their engine, inshallah, their faith engine. And then the last point about, you know, being kind to students, the love pedagogy. Dr. Chetnoraini Arwah, may Allah have mercy on her, she identified the need for mercy, you know, for teachers. She went to Australia for her sabbatical, and she saw the teachers calling children darling, love, you know, being very, very merciful to the children. And I think we need to bring back this Raḥmah to our teaching, to our students, to ourselves. So those are some thoughts to be shared, inshallah, for what they're worth.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abdul Shakur. I take that as your parting note. So if I can listen to and hear from the rest, Prof. Kamal as well as Dr. Farid and Dr. Azam for your parting notes. Prof. Kamal? You are muted, Prof.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all the panelists, because I learn a lot from their input and their observations. And I wish that our Dr. Susan and Brother Zahir from Legacy, I do not know if they were following or not.
Yeah.
If they were following, that's good, because I think I think they are doing something great in the USA with their school, inshallah. And I hope that our discussions on the spiritualization of the pedagogy would also be useful for them, although their level is still at the secondary and lower secondary, whereas I think we were talking more about the university or higher education level. But anyway, it's nice to listen to our brothers, and that I am very grateful to be invited and very honored to be part of this virtual forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Kamal. Brother Zahir Arastu has written something here. Let me share with all of you. Legacy International Online High School is striving to infuse spirituality in all subjects and to integrate across all subjects. However, perhaps the key leverage factor in transformational pedagogy, regardless of instructional practice and curriculum, is building strong supportive relationships between the Murabbi and the students. Very well indeed. Yeah, very well stated. All right, thank you very much, Brother Zahir, as well as I would like to call upon Dr. Farid to say something about, as his parting note. Dr. Farid?
Okay, thank you very much, and I'm very thankful to our panelists, and especially our Sheikh, Prof. Emeritus Professor Dr. Muhammad Kamal Hassan, and Dr. Abdul Shakur and Dr. Wan Azam. Thank you very much. I also benefited a lot, some connecting points which I can complete my ideas on spirituality and pedagogy. Just one last point, important point, is that I'm talking from a Sufi background perspective, is that sometimes when we are into this tarbiyatul nafs and tazkiyatul nafs, sometimes the emphasis is given too much to zikr, ibadat, but ilmus suluk is also about perfecting and enhancing our akhlaq, which have to go together. We activate our heart with zikr, with Quran tilawa, with ibādah, with tahajjud, with dua, but at the same time we also have to work on our akhlaq. We have to get rid of the radha'il, and we have to instill and master the good character. This has been always special emphasis by the Sufi sheikhs, and that's why the ilm suluk was very important, where we have to be attached with the murabbi, right? So I still remember my late Bukhari Sheikh Sufi Sarwar. He used to say, ilm, you'll get the knowledge, but you'll not get the sifat, you'll not get the qualities. And there was long time ago, I still remember our respected Prof. Kamal Hassan also, a very interesting way he put this. I think he didn't remember, but I remember it, that we have graduates, but they are intellectual barbarians. They have got the qualification, they get the masters, they get the PhD, but in terms of basic ethics, they are still wild from inside. So they are barbarians, right? So this is very important. Like when we are talking about taking our students for this community engagement, there should be a reflecting session when we come back. What did they master? What good character did they instill in them when they went for the community engagement? So this type of sessions are very important, so that we are not only mastering the spiritual zikr and ibadah, but also enhancing and putting ourselves, perfecting and decorating ourselves with the sifat and attribute of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Muhammad Farid Ali. Lastly but not least, Dr. Wan Azam, for your parting note, please.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to join the webinar today. And I remember I read somewhere, I think Shah Waliullah Dehlawi, but the translation, because I do not know Urdu and Persian, he said that when ta'limul talamil, he said that put the mercy of God first, I mean, to the students, and then the sympathy and also the empathy. I think I should consult Farid lah, Dr. Farid after this, or Dr. Asma, yeah, because she had done on Shah Waliullah. So thank you very much once again to our Prof. Dr. Kamal, and also other colleagues who have already given a lot of knowledge regarding the pedagogy and spirituality. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Azam. Thank you very, very much, Professor Kamal Hassan, Dr. Muhammad Farid Ali, Dr. Abdul Shakur Priest, and Dr. Wan Azam, as well as thank you very much all participants for being with us throughout the morning. We have come to the end of our program. Alhamdulillah, I'm sure everybody has benefited a lot. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Now, to mark the end of our program, I would like to call again Brother Saiful to read a short dua. Brother Saiful.
Yeah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم إنا نسألك رضاك والجنة ونعوذ بك من سخطك والنار ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب ربنا أفرغ علينا صبرا وتوفنا مسلمين اللهم لا تدع لنا ذنبا إلا غفرته ولا هما إلا فرجته ولا عيبا إلا سترته ولا دينا إلا قضيته ولا سقما إلا شفيته ولا مريضا إلا شفيته ولا حاجة إلا قضيتها ويسرتها فيسر لنا أمورنا واشرح صدورنا ونور قلوبنا واختم بالصالحات أعمالنا ربنا آمنا فاغفر لنا وارحمنا وأنت خير الراحمين ربي أوزعني أن أشكر نعمتك التي أنعمت علي وعلى والدي وأن أعمل صالحا ترضاه وأدخلني برحمتك في عبادك الصالحين ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وقنا عذاب النار وقنا عذاب النار وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Ameen. Taqabbalallahu minkum. Alhamdulillah, we have come to the end of our program. On behalf of Centris, we would like to apologize for any weaknesses that we have, and anything that is good that comes out of this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the weaknesses are ours entirely. We would like to end by saying thank you once more. Inshallah, we will see each other again in another program, inshallah, in the near future, inshallah, in the new year. With that, we will end with Tasbih Kafara and Surah Al-Asr. Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much, Prof. Kamal, Dr. Farid, Dr. Azam, Dr. Shakur. Thank you very much, the team behind the screen, Shafiullah, Saiful, Ustaz Saiful. And all participants, thank you very, very much for joining.